The topic of today's discussion is why your job may be responsible for why you're still poor. Although this seems counterintuitive, there actually are some very clear reasons why being in a job might lead you to being less financially successful than you thought you would be, especially at this point in your life. Now, there are times when jobs are absolutely necessary. And so to start things off, I want to make sure that it's clear that everyone has to, at some point in their life, work a job. But there are trade-offs, and in thinking about your long-term career trajectory, there are different trade-offs that may not be worth it in the long run. So in today's video, we're going to talk about 4 key reasons why a job may actually lead you to be broke or poor in the long term. For those of you who are new here, welcome back. This is Simplify with Ryan. I'm Ryan, and we talk about all things financial independence. Before we move on in today's discussion, I would like to ask for your support. Please subscribe to the channel. It really does make a difference. We're trying to grow a community here. If you like the video, please like the video. Put a comment down below if you have some thoughts that you'd like to share. I know it's annoying to hear these requests every single video, so I'll keep it short, but your support is very valuable to me. Thank you very much. Now let's jump into the very first reason why your job is keeping you poor. Jobs provide a very linear structure for income. You start at a certain level, and your ability to grow from that level is very tied to all sorts of outside metrics. Each job has associated with it some statistics and data that dictate where you start. And these hourly rates usually tie to the difficulty of doing that job. So if there are some prerequisites that are more difficult to attain, you'll likely be making more hourly. Now, there eventually are jobs that are offered that are salary based. Those tend to be a bit more aligned with professional experience and or education. And those can be in a slightly different category, although I'll couple those all together in the form of job. For both of these categories of jobs, your salary does not exponentially increase at any point in time during your career. There are ways of getting promotions. Perhaps moving from one organization or institution to another is a way to increase your salary more exponentially than otherwise noted. But traditionally within an institution, there are only certain amounts that you can be increased by each year. And so where you're hired, which usually as at the beginning of your career, dictates how your raises are passed out over time. This can keep you limited. In some cases, these raises do not even keep up with inflation every year. And so if you're in a job where you're getting 2% or 1%, if you're a public educator, for instance, or tied to some government position, your salary is definitely not keeping up over time with inflation. Now, this leads me into the second reason. When you're in a job, you are trading your time for money. So this trade-off is usually necessary early on in your career. You can acquire skills and other things that can make you more successful as an entrepreneur or a business owner. And that's when the metric of time versus money starts to shift. But as long as you're in a job, you are expected to perform a certain number of hours every week. Now, this traditionally is around 40 hours. But if you're in a salaried position, oftentimes the expectations are that you get your job done. And so your hours can actually be far more than the 40-hour per week target. You're not getting paid for those extra hours. You're just expected to produce results based upon the job that you were hired to do. And so this is a very bad equation in the long run for you to become wealthy, to break out of poverty. You're giving your most valuable asset, which is time, for money, which may not be commensurate with the actual loss of that time in the first place. So this leads me into reason number 3. You are not in a job building ownership or equity for your time. This equation, again, is very important, but in order for it to pay off in the long run, Smart people know that building a business or developing some sort of asset that you own will ultimately yield better results. Not only in a business that you own would you be able to take a salary or extract enough money to pay for your expenses, but you're also creating equity by contributing to this asset that's producing value in the world, that's producing value that rewards you in terms of equity and the valuation of that business. If you're in a job, you are building a business for another institution, but there's always an owner. Someone owns that institution or organization. That person is benefiting from your time to build wealth on their behalf. That asset ultimately is what's going to be worth a lot in the long run, whereas just exchanging your time for a prescribed amount of money results in a very limited amount of growth potential. You're always capped at the salary that you have every year, so you know exactly where you'll be. For some people, this comfort is nice, and so they settle into a job. But for others, knowing that there's so much more potential out there is really hard for them to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Those people end up as entrepreneurs, business owners, etc., whereas the former group likely remains happy and comfortable in a job. Now, the next reason has to do with taxes. If you are an earner in a job, this is the highest tax category available. Smart people who own businesses know that lots of your tax liability can be shrouded in that business. It can be erased, and this is all done via legal channels, but that tax liability can be greatly reduced while you're also concurrently building equity that we just discussed in the previous point. So this results in a great reduction in the amount of taxes you're paying while you're simultaneously growing an asset that's worth lots of money and growing your wealth accordingly. This dynamic is one that cannot be recreated in a job. You are definitely contributing to another person's wealth by developing the asset that they own, but ultimately you're not helping yourself. Again, you're in a very transactional relationship, trading your time for the money that you've agreed to accept in exchange. Now, these points reinforce one particular dynamic which always appears, and that is the debt trap dynamic. So when you are working a job, you often get that job because you have expenses. Those expenses grow over time. You want the nicer house, you want the nicer car. Because of this growth, you're forever tied to a job to pay off the debt that you've brought in, to pay off these toys, these nice things that you want in your life. Instead of creating that dynamic, I argue that it's much smarter to avoid buying these things until you're financially able to pay cash for them. In other words, don't take on the burden of debt because it constrains your ability to make changes in your life, to start a business, to go after that income-producing property that you'd really like to have. Developing assets is a way out of this debt cycle, whereas staying in a job to pay continuously to own these toys that you think that you've earned will keep you forever in this cycle of debt. Don't be fooled. It's a trap. So decide that you're okay with the old car. You're okay with the old house, especially if you're in your younger years. If you're older, more established, and have a family, there are true dangers here because you get used to a certain style of living. Your lifestyle then requires a job to feed that lifestyle. You can't afford to separate from that job for any length of time, especially the amount of time necessary to build an asset or to build a business, because you structured your life in a way that you're paying off debt, and that debt requires the trade-off that you made with your time. So to sum it all up, you're exchanging your most valuable asset to pay for assets that are not assets. a car, a house, things that over time are likely to depreciate. And even if they're appreciating, like in the case of a home, this appreciation is likely relatively minor compared to what it could be. In other words, you'll be in this cycle forever and you'll never develop true wealth. So the dynamic around having a job is one that has very defined ceilings. And these ceilings lead to debt traps and other problems in how you work from day to day to build wealth. Now, I will say that there are some jobs that offer you very rewarding salaries. There are folks who are making $500,000 a year, $700,000 a year. These are usually tied to professions that are doctor, lawyer, potentially engineer, depending on the type of engineering field that you're working in. These can be very, very rewarding. And if you do make enough money in a job and then apply that money to developing and building a portfolio of assets that pay you, you absolutely can build wealth. Even teachers, I know, have been successful in building wealth because they have a lifestyle that prioritizes developing assets that produce cash returns over time. Now, there are hybrid styles that are required here in order to achieve this. You can't fall into the debt trap buying more and more expensive items, more and more expensive cars and houses, and then have to feed that addiction over time. You can't fall into that dynamic. What you can do is develop a savvy saving schedule to slowly invest over time and allow compounding interest to do its magic. This is a much slower way to develop wealth, and it's certainly not optimized. There are better ways of doing it, but those ways require a higher degree of risk. And so if you are risk averse, a job can be a foundational requirement to get from point A to point B. Just know that it's not the fastest route to wealth. A job is nothing more than a tool to get you from point A to point B. I recommend that you use a job early in your career to develop the skills that you ultimately need to build a business or to build a portfolio of assets that pay you without you exchanging your time. Ultimately, your time is most valuable. To buy back your time and still get paid is the dynamic that results in long-term wealth. This also contributes to tax saving strategies over the years and can have profound impacts on where you end up on your wealth building journey. Please let me know down below what you think about having a job. Are you in a job? Do you feel stuck? There are ways out. If you have questions, please put them below. Otherwise, I hope you found some value in this video, and I look forward to seeing you next week for another short discussion.